survival strategy, and we just lean into our resources. And for some of us, it feels like the very first time in our lives where we've been experiencing so many things that we can't control, actually feeling like maybe there's nothing that we can control. But there is a freedom that we do have, and I'm just wanting to invite our ambassadors to help flesh this out for us a little bit, because the way we think of things, it might be that by all of a sudden our job went away and now we don't have that freedom. But for someone else, they're forced to go to work and they don't have the freedom to stay home. And some of us have to go and be with our families, and some of us get to go and be with our families. And so it's just a matter of attention, and where your attention goes, your energy does follow. So we're leveling up into our ability to be with what is, and we're creating a new normal, sort of minute by minute. And the ambassadors, you know, this is not your first rodeo, you guys and gals. This is something that you've already been through, that you've already survived. And in a lot of ways, being locked down is literally what it's called in prison, when people are sent back to their cells and they're not allowed to come out. And sometimes I've gone back into San Quentin after a 4-week lockdown and been so distraught for our guys. And they're like, you know what, we got so much done. We got so much rest. Even in prison, perhaps especially in prison, people can get so busy and can keep going and going. So could you guys just fill it in for us a little bit? Help us to understand, you know, I can put words to it, but what does that mean, Clay, to be in lockdown from being on the inside? Can you help us understand?
It's actually, it's pretty, it's miserable. It's very helpless. You get used to it, as you do with all sorts of misery. You grow accustomed to it in a way, but it's still very restrictive, obviously. And if you're unfortunate enough to share a cell with somebody that you don't particularly enjoy being around, it's even worse. I personally, maybe it's different for other people, I prefer being in the hole, or being in what they call solitary confinement. I would prefer that to being on lockdown, because at least I could be by myself when I'm in the hole. Being on lockdown as an entire unit, like, you can feel the stress, you can feel that everybody's not digging it, so to speak. And in my own experience, I feel like even the guards were less pleasant to deal with, because I felt a lot of times like their freedom to just walk around and give us our meals through the little hole in the door, I felt like sometimes it was flaunted. And again, that might be specific to me, I don't know.
But you know, you're drawing an interesting distinction between solitary and lockdown, which is like even a degree more. And some people are in solitary right now. A lot of people are quarantined, and that's a helpful, you know, distinction.
Yeah, it's not a fun place to be. And you know, if you're by yourself, it's almost, maybe this is a 5 thing. It's almost like, all right, I can be alone and just go crazy. You know, man, here we go. If I'm with another person in the cell, it's now I got to deal with their misery too. And, it's not fun. You have very little freedom in prison as it is, but you do have some to an extent, relatively speaking. So when that gets all taken away from you, it's just like, what's to live for? Why am I even bothering to get to the next day? I can't leave this, you know, 8x10 or 6x8 or 5x8, whatever size cell that you happen to be in.
Right.
What's the point? That's where you really start to wonder, what is the actual point? What am I doing? There's no benefit there. It's not fun.
So I'm gonna pause you there and just invite you, Vic. What do you want to add to this? What's it like to be on lockdown?
Well, it all depends on what kind of mess you're involved in while you're doing time. Sometimes it's a lifesaver, and sometimes it's a punishment. I know for me, being involved in everything that I was involved in while being in custody, it's more of a safety thing, and you don't have to worry about stuff. And it also gives you time to actually reflect and collect your thoughts about, you know, what's really going on in life and what are you doing with yourself. And somewhat, instead of just being miserable, it allows you to like just think about certain things. When you're being punished and you're put in lockdown, you can't come out. they allow you to come out maybe once a week, you know, and that's to take a shower and that's to make a 15-minute phone call, you know, while, see, for me, it's different though, because where I was at, everything was done by race, you know what I mean? And it was, you know, other races got more privileges than I did because of my association. So it's really different, you know what I mean? And when I used to see that being locked up, I used to hate them people, you know what I mean? Like I had pure, like I wanted to do something to them because, yeah, like Clay said, it is like flaunting, you know what I mean? And they're looking at me like I'm a caged animal, and that's the way that I felt. In those certain situations, it made you hate certain people, and it made you feel angry and miserable. And it was pretty much unfair the way that, you know, certain people get treated in there.
Right. And I actually want to say, Vic, that you're making an important point, because it's the same thing, that race is no different on the outside. There's still people getting treated unfairly and by their color of their skin, and there's a huge power dynamic that's going on. That doesn't stop. And so compounding your lockdown on the inside, there's that added onto it.
There's a lot of times that I was on lockdown, or I was, you know, segregated because of things that I've done, but also the way it was good for me, because, you know, it kept me away from certain things that I shouldn't have been involved in, and it just kept my mind right on certain levels of me doing all that time. You know, so I mean, I take it for a grain of salt. You know, you're either gonna learn to live with it and adapt to it, or you're just gonna allow your emotions to get the best of you and turn it into a way and use it in a way that you shouldn't use it. You know, there has been times that I did that. So I get it. The whole cabin fever, the whole can't get out and just go outside, or, you know, you just can't go out and make a cup of coffee, or you can't play cards because you're in a, well, for me, I was always in a cell by myself if I was on lockdown or if I was in solitary. You know, there was no cellie, you know what I mean? Which I was grateful for, because like Clay said, you don't want to live with other people's problems, you know what I mean? Because I got 1,000 of them myself. I can't deal with my own and deal with hearing them all the time. So it was, to me, sometimes it was a blessing.
Right. So I like what you guys are opening up, and we're going to come back and hear how you dealt with it. But Sue, from a lone female ambassador perspective that we get today, how was it for you? What did you learn from being in lockdown?
Well, for the amount of time I was there, I was mostly in intake. And so in intake, you're pretty much locked down 23 hours a day. And, you know, men versus women, it was like 40 foot by 40 foot. That's what I walked it anyway. And so if you can imagine being locked down with seven people you've never met, all different kinds of backgrounds and all different kinds of places they've come. The added stress of the jail and the prison and the treatment. It's like the mode that I went into was a tolerance. You know, I had to find some tolerance of everything, and acceptance. And so it was a challenge. It was an inner challenge, the process to hang on to myself and my own sanity, dignity, and everything else that you want to hang on to when you're in a place where there really is no dignity given to you or anything like that. So quite a life lesson for sure.
Well, and I think what you're pointing to is so tender, right? You know, for all of us, it's an inside job to find this peaceful place, no matter what's going on around us. But what's sort of Herculean about what you're describing is that you're in such a hellish situation, kind of like a lot of us feel we're in right now. And the only way out is in. There's not really a way to find that outside of you when you're sitting there in that prison cell. So I appreciate what you're pointing to.
Well, yeah, and I think that a lot of the guys I work with in reconnecting, I hear that a lot, that they seem to understand that you can be in a prison of your own making and you don't have to be behind bars. And I think they really know that. I think I really know that. And I think the guys here could speak for themselves, but but there is a difference, and they get it, and I get it.
Right. And that's what we use the Enneagram for, is to find a different kind of freedom before people are ever even released. And some students, may not be, but that freedom is there for all of us. And Ruben, I just want to go to you. It looks like you found yourself another quiet spot, and I know you're really on the move today, so I'm appreciating you. What do you want to add to this conversation about being on lockdown and finding freedom?
So to me, it was different than Clay and Mr. Soto and Sue. Well, actually, a little combination of everything. I actually felt I felt safe. I felt wonderful when they went on lockdown, because I was in my element. I was, it was time for me. I'm an artist, so it was time for me to do the tattooing, to catch up on my reading, to do everything that I wanted to do. Outside the cell, the yard was very aggressive, very hostile. So, I had to go with the program. But when it was locked down, I always prepared myself. I knew they were always coming. And like Mr. Soto said, because I was running with a certain race, certain things were expected of me. So I always prepared. I always had my canteen ready. So if it was a 3-month lockdown or something extensive like that, I didn't have to worry to go to the store. I was prepared. So to me, actually, a lockdown was a blessing.
Right. So you can kind of feel the preparedness part that you're talking about, that it does give you, in an interesting way, a way to relax, a way to kind of put things down for a second. Alex, I want to invite you in, because you just got a chuckle, Ruben. When Ruben was talking, Alex started to chuckle. Why does it make you laugh?
Yeah, Ruben just described me. That was a perfect time. It was a perfect time. It was safety, first of all. It was safety, and it gave me a great opportunity to read. My lockdowns played a big part of me being a minister today by knowing the Bible, because that was my go-to. So I went to the Bible, and because I was with the Bible, read the Bible, gained a lot of knowledge, I had a sense of peace from the safety, because just as Ruben related and Victor also talked about, running with a certain fashion of people, it brought a lot of safety. But at the same time, it was a time for preparation, because I had to prepare for what I knew what was going to come when the lockdown was over. And created a structure, a routine every day. I had my own routine that I would carry out throughout the day. And it wasn't about being stir crazy, because I was pretty busy in that cell. And matter of fact, I'm jealous today, and everybody gets to stay home, and I still have to come to work.
Well, there's something about that, that rhythm that you as a 9 know how to create, where these body types, we really lean into that, and that serves us. It's how we survive. Literally, it's what you're describing, and then it carries us when we need it.
Yes.
What do you want to add to this conversation, Renee? 17 years is a long time to experience this, and I know you've had more than a little bit of lockdown.
My longest experience with the lockdown was at San Quentin Reception Center, which is kind of like a big lockdown, but there was like, there was like, I don't know, 5 months when I think it was swine flu or something, and we were on lockdown, and so we were getting fed at ourselves. And I actually, being openly gay, especially when I was in general pop, which is opposite of protective custody, in the beginning part, like the first probably 12 years of my being in custody, I was in general population, and I was also in the other car, which is the collection of every other race that doesn't fit in white, white, black, Sereno or Norteño or Paisas. So everything else goes to the other car. And so basically I had no real protection in a sense. So I had to be very careful, is basically what I'm trying to say about what I was doing and who I was doing it with. I learned how to, so lockdown was like kind of like a safety zone for me. Plus while in prison, I learned how to sew. I learned how to make these little pieces of candy that people would buy. So I became industrious, just like I am when I was in my addiction. But it was a lot of safety for me because I could, you know, be around and not have to worry about, you know, getting possibly victimized. I mean, things happened, you know, when I was in prison because things happened. And so it tended to be a safer time. And like I said, I learned how to sew. I'm just like Alex, I have personally read the Bible from front to end, like at least 6 times. And a lot of that had to do with being incarcerated, doing daily mail in and out studies. And so I got to, you know, rebuild my moral fabric because, you know, I had, you know, let things go so long that certain things had become okay. So like I'm saying, everything became more, a little more safe for me.
Right.
Less hectic.
Thank you, Renee. Clay, just coming back full circle, what is it that you learned about yourself by studying the Enneagram that has prepared you for this lockdown that you're seeing outside now?
I think probably the most obvious thing to me is that I'm not getting mad at people for the way that they're reacting in their own little personal way. And before I knew anything about the Enneagram, before I knew anything about myself, that was usually my go-to. Like if people around me didn't respond to things the way that I did, it was like, what's this dude's like, I just immediately went to anger because I thought they were just so dumb. And I hate to admit that, that's just the reality of it. So the flip side of that now is I'm looking around people handling things very differently. And it's like, you know, to each their own, you know, kind of a mindset. And if I have anything to offer to individuals in ways of like, if they're just really struggling and maybe throwing a word or two at them, I'm comfortable doing that because I don't feel like I'm judging them for being quote unquote wrong or different. I don't feel like I'm struggling with a lot of this, the way that a lot of people are. And I'm glad for that, but I also just kind of like, I'm not mad at them for it. You know, that's how they're dealing with it. It's tough. It's weird place for everybody to be. It's not
Clay, yesterday, sorry to interrupt you. You used this really surprising word to me. You said you're feeling some joy and something about how people are going about things. And then can you explain that for us?
Oh man, I get myself in trouble when I try to explain this because it makes me sound like a real jerk when I say this, but so maybe you could put some friendly flavoring on it after I say it. But I enjoy seeing people understand what it's like to just have their world turned upside down. And I think that there's a lot of understanding that can come from that. And when people get through this and when they're on the other side, I think we'll be more on the same page. And I can talk about prison. I can talk about being on lockdown in prison. I can talk about all this stuff until I'm blue in the face. And the reality is a lot of people just don't understand until they've been there. And there's a whole lot of people who are there right now. And I just think it's maybe I shouldn't say joyful. Maybe I'll just say that I feel that it's of great benefit for people to experience what it's like. And
well, I think that fives want to keep it real. And, you know, the thing that one learns in prison, and I haven't been incarcerated, I've just spent a lot of time alongside people who have, is that it's atrocious. And yet when things are really hard, we are really invited to take a look at who we really are. And something about that process is what you've been exposed to, and you took the challenge up. So when other people are out and being exposed to that and they take the challenge up, there's something that's connecting. Yeah. And you know, I'm aware of our time. We're going to just open up the conversation a little bit more. And I see these comments coming in. Vic, I'm wondering if you'd like to add something about this. How is it that learning your type and learning the Enneagram, how has that helped you out, and how are you appreciating it now, watching the world on lockdown?
I mean, if this didn't happen, right, a lot of people aren't really connected with one another anymore. You know what I mean? It's all about the internet, it's about your cell phones, it's about social media. It's all this other stuff. People don't know how to conversate anymore. People don't know how to spend time with people anymore. You know, and I think this is a good lesson and a good stepping stone for people to get back in what I mean?
That's right.
So for me, as a type 9, I'm going along with the flow. I still got a life to live, and I have to do this. Whether I'm scared or not, whether I'm nervous or not, I still got to do what I got to do because I need to survive. The same thing that I did in prison. I lived every day, whether it be in fear, whether it be in excitement or anxiety, but I adapted to my environment because I still had to go on. I still had to live. You know what I mean? I still had to fight for something. And I still got to live out here.
Right. What I think I'm appreciating from both you and Vic and Clay, and I can hear the like the underlying, yeah, like you know, it's like Dana was saying today about the 6, like it's about time everybody realized this is what it's like inside my head all the time, she said, you know, like the 6, I'm really used to freaking out and being in the worst case scenario. So you don't have to be in prison to feel a little vindicated when you watch somebody else lose their cool, right? And it's not that we want to stay there, it's that we feel our humanity, our shared connection, that there is no difference inside, outside. And in the same way that people are freaking out, like the invitation is to recognize that everything outside of us is an aspect of us. And this person who's freaking out over toilet paper now, well, I freaked out over toilet paper, I just did it 15 years ago in a cell. And now here we are. So I love the realness that you're bringing, Vic. I think it's so important. I want to go to Chuck. I think you have audio now, and just invite you in to say hello.
I was trying to think about what I was going to say earlier, but people that's been in society, I was incarcerated for 23 years. People in society have been out here and been in a fast-paced move. Everything is instant. People don't really talk no more. So the panic is now you have to confront those people that you haven't spoken to all this time, and now you have to reconnect. And the reconnection starts with yourself first, I believe. And then you'll be able to reach out to other people.
So just for people, I know the audio is a little hard to hear. I want to say that Chuck has been out for how long exactly, Chuck?
A month and a half.
A month and a half. And living in a temporary housing situation and not able to get out of there, but has been spending some of his time feeding the homeless and lining up to get a job and taking an Uber to get all of his things handled and just showing up. And that's what we talked about. It's like, you know, that's what ones do, is we just kind of get into what needs to get done, and we get very sort of practical about it. And there's a sensibility to that. It's needed. And people may be freaking out, and you've learned to sort of stay cool. I'm going to invite you in, Renee, and hear what you're thinking about as part of this conversation. How has learning your type influenced what you're able to do on the outside in this lockdown situation, Renee?
So this weekend has been a perfect example that, I mean, I'm a type 3, and I can really honestly get things done. And so this weekend, my mom, I go into my mom's room, and she's very weak looking, and I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, I'm really tired. And so she tries to sit up, and she has to go to the bathroom, and she gets to the edge of the bed, and she just almost slides on the floor, and I catch her, and I put her on her chair. And this started my inner like freaking out of like, oh my God, did she have coronavirus, right? And mind you, my time in prison, I stayed drunk and on pills the whole time. So being out here, being sober and clean, and having to take responsibility in this situation, what it reminded me is that as a 3, I know I have the capacity to do this, whatever needs to be done, and I don't know exactly yet what needs to be done. And it had to do with her diabetes, but I got to witness myself being present, which is a blessing, because normally I'll just start doing. And I realized I was so ramped up at first. The first call to the doctor, I was cutting my mom off, telling the doctor everything that I thought was going on and not letting the doctor talk to my mom. So the switch, when the next call came, was I slowed down and I let my mom respond. The Enneagram has been priceless. I got through that. And when we finally realized it was probably some sort of infection and that her blood sugar was really high, now we have to start monitoring it. I didn't panic. I didn't lose sight of anything that was important, which was I wasn't here to make me feel okay. I was here to navigate the situation in a collective moment that I needed to be there for my mom and not start doing a bunch of things that were not helpful, and which I can do very easily. I start doing stuff that I think is going to make the situation okay, and then my first and then I got to connect with my community. First was the Stepping Stone jail ministry service that I go to every Sunday morning, and I got to remember with them that I'm not alone, you know, because in my threeness, I get into this thing in my head where like I have to do everything myself, and if I don't, it's not going to get done. And then I got to see my EPP family later in the same day, and got connected again, and knowing the Enneagram, knowing myself, and being able to see myself getting reactive and slow it down.
Right. And that's the being with your own heart, and the heart you have for your mom, and the heart you have for everything. Just that amount, like that's transformation. You know, there's a ton of freedom in being able to sit still if I'm a type 3. It's beautifully put, Renee. Sue, can I invite you in and say, what else do you want to add to the conversation about how knowing your type 1 has helped you in this lockdown situation, what's happening with us in the world?
Oh, well, I think, you know, my gifts of my type 1 are kind of shining up. And I think that if I can just, when I get worried, because I'm older and my family has to come and go, and I can get worried about myself or others, the health, the risks. I kind of just have this process that I go through where I accept, and then I validate, and then I love. So it's kind of like, and for me as a type 1, it's like that's almost key to everything. And it's so I just kind of have to accept everything as it's happening. And then validate myself and my feelings and the feelings of people around me, and then just love. And it just helps me to get through it, and to help people. And so, yeah, that's what I do. Thank you.
You know, the type 1 is so good at discerning what's going on, and when we're not really connected to that discernment, it comes out as judgment. So I love the acceptance that you're bringing into your language, and that is truly the teaching that we need most. And I see Chuck nodding just underneath you. Chuck, I'm going to go back to you and see how your sound is now. Anything you want to add? I see you resonating.
Yeah, I just so for me as a type 1, I go to self-prayers. And before I even knew what it was, that's what I did. So just always being prepared. I think in our book, it's the 5 A's of mastery that we have to. So forgive me if I don't recite them exactly, but awareness, acceptance, like Sue just said, those things are like two most important things. You have to accept yourself, the situation that it is, and then the people that surround you. Once I start healing, I expect the people around me to be at the same light. And then when I realized that they wasn't, that little judge in my head had me like, man, what is wrong with you? You know, call myself, and in that I started trying to help people in the same way that I was helped. So the tools that we have, I just try to go out when they let me out, share them, bring people up.
Thank you, Chuck. Ruben, what else do you want to say about how knowing your type has helped you with this lockdown situation? What are you seeing on the outs?
So I was listening to everyone, and I actually had a situation. My whole this weekend that I spent with my mom was just so filled with rich experience that that I'm grateful. I'm grateful for those experiences because it permits me to work on myself more and gives me the hands-on of life. You know. The hands-on experience of life to deal with a certain situation. You know, and before I mention what I'm gonna mention, you know, everything's okay. You know, I became unhealthy 8. You know, I've been mentioning that I'm a healthy 8, but there was a situation that I got out of hand, and I became an unhealthy 8. And the Enneagram, because I took the Enneagram, I said, okay, this is my 8. This is the unhealthy 8. What am I doing? You know, I'm letting this situation go too far. And you know, I reached out and I called a few people, and they were like, hey man, we're really worried about you. Don't do nothing dumb, you know. I simmered down. And then I slept. I slept over it, and then in the morning I was able to express myself as a healthy 8, and let the person know that, hey man, you know, I did this, but you know, I just want you to know that it was out of love, from, you know, that strong strength of the love that comes from an 8, but just expressed in a different way, you know. And I'll give just one scenario of that whole situation. You know, I had a family member that was kind of like mistreating my mom, so I grabbed that family member's clothing and put it outside the porch. And it was raining out here in LA, and I stood out in the rain waiting for that family member to come home so I could say, hey man, you know, I don't appreciate the way you're treating moms, you know, and this has been going on all this time. So, you know, you're a grown person now, so go ahead and find your way. My mom felt empathetic and said, no, you know, think about it. And she went out while it was raining and went to get some blankets. And I was really scared because seniors are very susceptible to the coronavirus. So I started yelling from the top of my lung. I said, Mom, where are you going? I said, get back in here, you know. And but it showed me that, you know, I was really concerned about her, you know. And to me, you know, being an 8, it just made me respond to the maximum, to my maximum capacity to express how, you know, I'm a person with a few words, but when I express myself, I kind of like, I appreciate when people tell me things straight out, cold cut and dry, because that's the way I understand them.
And that's the way that you translate them for your mom too. When you say, you know,
Yes.
get back here. It's like said with heart, and I get that part of you. You're trying to protect her, right? And and you're not losing track of your heart. You can be strong. You don't have to just because we know the Enneagram doesn't mean I can never be assertive again if I'm a type 8. No, just means I gotta keep track of my heart. Ruben, I'm going to stop you there just because we're winding down a little bit. And I want to go over to Alex before we go. And for all of our ambassadors, what piece of advice would you have for the world right now? Something that you'd like to leave our panelists with and just people in general who are paying attention?
Well, I believe this is definitely a time for us to really get to know self. Because I believe whatever inside of you will flow out of you through this time. I believe this is a time where we can reconnect with self and really pay attention to our needs. And when you know your needs, you're able to see the needs of others. You're able to either let that flow out of you. I believe this is a time of reconnecting to a power greater than oneself, whatever that may be. It's a time where we can get back with family and start showing concern, start having the real true connection that all humans desire. It's a great need as being a human. It's human connection. I think our society had unconsciously, we got to the point where the busyness of this world has separated us from true human connection. The true human connection where you can show your true heart, you can show the love and compassion. Families can definitely reconnect in a greater level than we ever thought we could. It's just a great time for the world itself to return back to a point of healing. We were sick and didn't even know it. We were lost and didn't even know it. Some people say it's time to start seeking the face of God instead of the hand of God.
Mm.
So I really think it's time for us to really look at self, be healed inside, and let that hope and that healing flow out of you towards others.
Thank you, Alex. Clay, what would you leave our listeners with?
Listen to Alex. I mean, my goal is without intending to sound selfish, is to worry about myself first. And it's like when you're on the airplane and they always tell you, before you help everybody else, make sure you got your own stuff situated first. Yeah. That's kind of how I feel. My kids are next, obviously. And then to just pay attention. I mean, to be open to the fact that things are funky for a lot of people, and it's not just you. And it's not really necessary to judge other people's reactions. And if you think you can offer something to them, then fine, go for it. I don't feel necessarily overwhelmed by the whole thing the way others do, but I do feel like we're right on the verge of big things. Not always the good kind of big things, but they can become good. But to summarize all of what I think, I would just say pay attention and be open to new things, whether that's in yourself, that's in your neighborhood, or just in the world in general. Just be aware and be open.
Thank you, Clay.
Yeah.
Vic, what would you like to add? Advice for our listeners?
Well, one of my favorite songs by Al Green is "Love and Happiness." You know what I mean? And when you listen to that song, it just puts you in a place where nothing around you can ever trouble you, and all the bad thoughts and all the anxiety just goes away because of the way that the song goes. And I get it. Everybody's going crazy, but I think like Alex said, Clay said, it's a time to reconnect with everybody. It's a time to just reach out, give that helping hand when you can, because not everybody can handle an experience like this. You know what I mean? It's new to people that they never had to deal with something like this. I mean, it's entertaining, yeah, because it's like everybody else is saying, it makes us look at it like, well, we've been there, now you know what it's like what we've gone through, but in different circumstances. But at the same time, for people that's never been through it, it's heartbreaking because they don't know what it's like. It's like watching a chicken with the head cut off. Everybody's everywhere. Everybody's around. They're panicking. And it's really making everything worse than better, So my thing is reach out to your loved ones, reach out to your friends, your family, get closer to one another. You know what I mean? It's important to have that family connection, that friendship, and just any relationship that you had in the past, even if it's even if the relationship isn't even that good, you know what I mean? These are the times that people need to be uplifted and pushed, you know what I mean? So they know that, life isn't over and this isn't the end of the world. And we've gone through so much stuff in our life, and it doesn't matter if it was World War I, World War II, Vietnam, it doesn't matter. People pushed through that and they made it, they survived. And they just need to take it as a grain of salt that as a society, as human beings, as people showing love, we're going to make it through this too.
Beautiful. Thank you, Vic. Sue, what words of advice do you have to close us with?
Somebody once said to me, in my darkest days, there will be some good that comes from this. And that was really hard for me, even now when I think of it. But I think that everybody, there's some slivers of gold, there's some pieces of light that's there for everybody. And you may not see them right now, but they'll come if you just keep your eyes open and your heart open and know that they'll be there. Thank you.
Beautiful, Sue. Thank you. Renee, something you'd like to leave people with?
I think that we're all watching this thing unfold, and perception is everything, and we're perceiving it in different ways. And if we could just have a little bit of grace with each other, and make space for other people to take this situation in how they're taking it in, and Vic and other of my fellow ambassadors have said, well, we're going to get through this, like one way or another. Hopefully we can do it with a little more grace than we did when we started.
Thank you, Renee. Chuck?
Yeah, just connect with yourself. Like Alex said, that connection gonna flow out to the people around you. Your calmness, your ability to deal with it, it'll transmit to other people.
Thank you, Chuck. Ruben, any words of wisdom you want to leave us with, leave our listeners with before we close?
Okay, so the last time I was in the Zoom meeting, I spoke to Laura, and she said something so profound, man, that it stuck with me. And at the closing of that Zoom meeting, she said, you know, I'm embracing this moment. I'm embracing these feelings because they're valid. Or you know, I'm paraphrasing what she said. And to me, it's the same thing for everybody to, you know, because everybody's feeling is you have to validate them because I don't feel fear. Doesn't, and from what I've seen from the last Zoom, and I've seen a lot of fear and a lot of fright. You know, I was like, wow, man, you know, those feelings count. You know, just because I went through 25 years and I didn't, you know, and I felt a certain way, and now this is happening out here in the world, and the people out here in the world are feeling this. You know, those feelings count. You know, you know. But we're gonna get through this, and I want everybody to remember what they felt, because fear is emotion by itself, and you know, once we think back on it, we're gonna love it. We're gonna be like, wow, you know, I felt this, but now I feel brave, and it's valid. I think it's a beautiful moment. You know.
Thank you, Ruben. Alex, one more. You're a closer. Any more sentiments from you before we go?
I appreciate what Ruben just shared. I was going to say something like faith over fear. That's our theme at our church this year, is faith over fear. But what I've also learned is you have to be strong and be of good courage. You have to be of good courage. I posted yesterday that courage stomps out fear, but Zach posted something that said maybe courage embraces fear. And I really like that. So Zach, whenever you hear this, I appreciate that. And I'm going to use it. But we do, as a nation, as a people, and it all starts with self. So I'm inviting everybody to come back to self. And because what's inside of you, that's what's going to flow out of you. And I want to encourage you to reconnect with your faith, because the faith will overcome the fear.
Thank you, Alex. You know, I'm seeing all kinds of things come through the chat. I'm not able to read all of them because I'm trying to stay as present as I can to what's happening. But a lot of people are touched by you, all of you, for what you're sharing. I want to thank you for your courage. It's not easy to get on a live thing, and you are so tenacious in your hearts, you guys, and I learn from you all the time. And for those of you who are listening who would just like to sit at the feet of the ambassadors some more, you can. We have reconnecting classes that are happening online that were going on long before this pandemic started, and they will go on forever. And Sue is coordinating all of those. So all you have to do is drop us an email at info, and we'll get you connected up there. We'll also share this recording with you. And we had a band of benevolent donors who came together and created an emergency fund for ambassadors and people in our reconnecting community who would not have been able to survive this pandemic without that kind of financial assistance. And that assistance allowed one person to pay rent on the day that she was getting evicted. It allowed another person to buy groceries. It was a little confusing, I think, for people to think, where does this goodness come from? And that comes from all of you, from our larger EPP community. So I just want to say a huge shout out of gratitude for that, and to let you know, if you were ever sort of on the fence about dropping EPP a small donation, everything helps right now, and we are really trying to share what we have with people who we need to stay really grounded and on the planet, because they obviously have a lot to offer. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here, and be safe and stay connected. Thank you so much. Bye for now.